Let's make a start then. So this talk is going to be looking at what can we find in the 1921 census. You're very welcome to stay in touch. I am a bit cute with my English accent. So if anybody wants to stay in touch, you're very welcome. I don't do trees because I just take, I don't know, weeks, months, years. So, but I have got colleagues that do trees professionally. So if anybody needed some help, feel free to contact me and ask for some help. So these would be colleagues that charged, but I don't do that. If you enjoyed today's presentation, you can go on my website, which is searchmypast.co.uk. And there I've got a list of all my presentations coming up, most of which are free, but do check the time zones. I'm terrible with time zones, and I haven't put the time zones on there because I can never understand it. So there's a 4-page handout, which will either be in your chat or it will be winging its way towards you, but there is a 4-page handout. So you're welcome to make some notes, but there will be a handout. For those of you that were disappointed with your Christmas presents or disappointed with Valentine's Day, I did sit near my front door, nothing happened at all. So if anybody was disappointed with Christmas presents and Valentine's Day, then I've got 2 books for sale. One is called Ethical Dilemmas in Genealogy, does what it says on the tin. And the other one is called The Psychology of Searching, which is asking, why are you even doing a tree? Why don't you get some other hobby? These are on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. So let's crack on then. So tonight I'm going to be talking explicitly about the 1921 census, but let's have a look at censuses generally. I think that we as a community like censuses because usually, at least in the UK, they're held every 10 years. And this gives us a really interesting snapshot of families on one day every 10 years. We can trace their journey, we can see whether they've got more children or they've moved or they've got less children or they haven't moved. So we can quite often compose timelines and put people into a context. And the context, through skimming up and down the page, is finding people's families, neighbours, local and social surroundings. And I don't know about you guys, but quite often in the UK, in the older censuses, there's quite often the parents not living that far away. People did seem to cluster. We can also insert social observations. So we could add local, regional or national events as well. This slide is far too busy, so it's in your handout. I just wanted to give you an overview. So it would just give us all a headache reading it, but basically I'll just skim through this and it is cut and paste and in your handout. So from 1801, the government basically wanted to know how many people were living in Great Britain. And this was just a head count. So it was just numbers of people and it was only used for government planning. This was held on a Tuesday. In 1811, 1821 and 1831, these were held on the last Monday of the month. And again, these are just statistical summaries. So basically, from 1841, the census started including people's name. So in the UK, from 1841, we've got names. Oh, I can hear people coming in. Okay, so these were starting to be held on Sundays, and basically around this period in the UK, most people were working 6.5 or 6 days. And then it would be assumed that on a Sunday, you would be going to church in the morning, and then you'd have your Sunday dinner, and then you'd just be getting ready for your 6-day or 6.5-day week. So the censuses started being on Sunday evenings. So over the years, another layer of questions has got asked. So from 1841, we got names. Ages were rounded up or rounded down. So sometimes that can be a real eye-opener for people because they think they've got the wrong family, because in one census they're 24 and in the next one they're 40 when they should be 25, not 30. So sometimes the rounding up and down can make you doubt yourself when you're adding people. Your sex or gender, did you work, and were you born in or out of the county? 1851, relationships and single, married or widowed, and where you were born was added. 61, a column about disabilities. 71, a column about lunacy. 81 was the same as 71. 91 gave employment details and, quite interestingly, languages spoken. So that's useful for Welsh families. 1901, a column was added about employment. And I'm going to talk to you in a little bit of detail about 1911 and obviously about 1921. After 1911, the government put a 100-year closure rule. So that's worthwhile having a think about as well. So don't forget, this slide's too busy, but it is in your handout. A website that I think is fantastic is called A Vision of Britain to Time and Through Time, and this is clickable in your handout. The reason that I think it's fantastic is it's got loads and loads of really useful information, maps, old and new, photographs, travel writing, census reports, population statistics, what the different industries were like in specific places, and social structure. So this is really my cup of tea and is a fantastic website. So it's A Vision of Britain Through Time. Another website, which I find fantastic, and I obviously just need to get out a little bit more, but I love this one. I don't know why it's got this name, National Library of Scotland, or NLS, because basically it's got maps throughout the UK. I love this website, and they've got amazing, amazing maps. You can look at counties, you can look at coasts, you can look at weathers, but the one that I like is the sliding map. So what you can see here in the example on the right is a sliding map which can slide from an old map into today's map. So yeah, I definitely need to get out. Come on, Penny. I can spend hours and hours sliding around with these maps. It's just fantastic. Even just looking at the river has increased. So the National Library of Scotland, and it isn't just Scotland, it is the UK. Something that people from outside of the UK need to have a look at is the administrative counties. And these are like regions, and these are fixed now, but over the years have changed, sometimes slightly and sometimes dramatically. So sometimes if you lose an ancestor, it might not be that they've moved, it might be that the counties have changed. So for example, in Wales, there have been different amounts of counties, and obviously my ancestors live on a county border, so I lose them occasionally, and it's basically because the number of counties has decreased and increased. And irritatingly, mine live on the county border. A lovely website for looking at UK and Ireland genealogy and including these maps and county boundaries is Genealogy. So again, clickable in your handout. So let's crack on with the context for the 1921 census. So I thought it would be useful for us to just jump back one batch of 10 years into 1911. So as I've mentioned, these had defaulted into being held on Sunday evenings, and an enumerator would drop off the census and then come round and pick them up, and it would go in a file. So if you squeeze your eyes to the left, you can see some little dots, and that's where the enumerator has put those into a file. The 1911 census is fascinating, especially for us, because it asked the couple, if they were a couple, what is the length of your present marriage? So that's great, because then you can see how long they've been married. Hopefully the man asked the lady, because quite often the men forget, don't they? So what's the length of the present marriage? And for genealogists, the loveliest column, how many children have you had? So we're overjoyed with this now. We've got how long have you been married? So we can go off and look for a marriage certificate. And how many children have you had? So we can realize that they've had 5, 10, 15, however many children. However, I think I'd be traumatized standing at the door giving this bit of paper back, because the next question was the cheerful question: how many children are alive and how many are dead? Well, that's going to break everybody's heart filling in that question. And what we can see in this example is that this couple have been married for 41 years. That sounds lovely and romantic. And we can see the chap is 73 and the lady's 64. So that's a lovely romance, 41 years of marriage. But if you look closely, they've had 8 babies and 7 have died. So whilst this is fascinating information for us, it can also feel a bit upsetting, obviously. This was the first census that people were asked to fill in by themselves. So something really cute is that you can see your ancestor or the person of interest signature. So how exciting is that? And if you are a man, you may well have the same surname. So you could have a look and see, you know, how did they sign their surname compared to yours? So this is a lovely, interesting census, the 1911 one. Because people were filling it in by themselves, we can find quirky information. So in this instance, the lady, from what we can gather, hasn't been married and hasn't got any biological babies on that list, but she's got fur babies. So we've got here the name and sex of her cat and the name and sex of her dog. The enumerator was irritated with this and has crossed it out, but we can still see the name and sex and age of the cat and the dog. So that's kind of cute. On the bottom, we've got her signature and the address. In the bottom example, this is lovely. We've got a man who says that he's married. However, the lady that he's spending the night with is called Mistress. And they've also got 2 children. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but basically what we've got is a man with a wife, because it says that he's married, but he's labelled this lady Mistress, and then they've got the 2 babies. I think if I was standing at the door giving this to the enumerator, I'd be furious, and I don't think that Joseph would be staying at my house ever again. Also, we can have a look at the social history, for example, the suffragettes. So, oh, Amanda, Lois is trying to get in. Oh,
yeah, she's coming in. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So basically, what we've also got in 1911 is a little bit of tampering, if you like, with the comments, because people were filling it in for themselves. At the time, people were complaining that women could own a property, but they weren't allowed to vote. So a lot of women sabotaged or wrote on the census, and in some instances, husbands or fathers would also write. So we can see here somebody who's written some graffiti or sabotaged this census, and basically votes for women is written all across the middle. Some people wrote quite rude things and refused to give their name or their address. So these were all sabotaged and filled in with various social commentaries, and quite a lot of dads and husbands did agree. Interestingly, one of the suffragettes, Emily Wilding Davison, who was very prone to, complaining very, very loudly. Basically, she was the lady that a few years later ran across a race course and was hit by the horse, the king's horse, and she spent a few days in hospital and sadly died. So this was a very vocal woman. So rather interestingly here, and this has got two layers of information, basically, she was in the Houses of Parliament hiding in the cupboard. And the clerk in the Houses of Commons, or the Houses of Parliament, basically put her in to the census. So we can see that this lady was hiding in a cupboard and she was in the Houses of Parliament. So that's a social commentary piece of information on its own. Secondly, her mum filled it in and has got her as being at home that evening. So that's fine, you can do what you like, but basically that would probably be considered fraud because the lady wasn't at home, she was hiding in a cupboard in the Houses of Parliament. So two different angles there. One is she'd crept into the Houses of Parliament and was complaining about how women were being treated, and secondly, her mum has put her at home. So let's now start wafting into 1921. So between 1911 and 1921, we sadly saw World War I between 1914 and 1918. Whilst we have all had a degree of impact with COVID, we can now fully comprehend the flu pandemic that was rampaging between 1918 and 1920. There were, at the time, a period of a huge contrast in British society. Women had started to feel a bit more independent because they had been paid to work during World War I. So they'd got used to working outside of the home, having some pocket money and having a little bit more respect than being a housewife. So women wanted a little bit more. This is what led to the suffragette movement. And in 1918, women were allowed to vote for the first time over a certain age. However, unemployment was huge. And at the other end, the rich were getting even richer, and it could have been called the Roaring Twenties. And this was a period of massive prosperity for the aristocracy and the wealthy. So you had the poorest people hideously struggling, and you had the rich doing very, very well for themselves. So where was included and where wasn't included in the 1921 census? We can look at the map, and we can see in the map England, Wales, the Isle of Man, Channel Islands, merchant ships in the waters, ships of the Royal Navy, and people that were stationed overseas. Scotland did have a census, but these records are held separately. And Ireland didn't have a census, and I'll explain why in a minute. And their 1921 census was delayed until 1926. The National Records of Scotland very recently, the 30th of November 22, released the 1921 census. So you can find these in the National Records of Scotland. There are 9,000 books, 200,000 images, and nearly 5 million people. However, be aware that you have to pay per view, and the minimum amount that you can buy is 6 credits. So in England, that's £1.50. So I'm not sure what that would translate into for your currency, but basically it's pay per view. So £1.50 isn't a huge amount, but I'm not sure what that would be in your currency. Let's now look at the England and Wales context. There was mass unemployment. Don't forget World War I and the flu pandemic. Lots and lots of strikes. We're suffering with this at the moment. Even key workers like nurses are going on strike in England at the moment. So in 1921, mass unemployment, mass striking, coal rationing, and crucially, the partition of Ireland. The census was scheduled, as was normal, for the 24th of April on a Sunday, but it was postponed. And they didn't waste all the paper. So when you squeeze your eyes up and have a look at any of these censuses, you will see it's still got the 19th of June, the 24th of April on the date on the census, but it was postponed and was held on the 19th of June. So let's have a look at the situation with Ireland. I've been researching this more since I've discovered predominantly Irish DNA. So if we have a look at the map on the left, we can see the regions that are dividing up Ireland. But on the 3rd of May in 1921, Northern Ireland was created by the government, and therefore Ireland was divided into two self-governing polities. Northern Ireland, which is a part of Great Britain, and Southern Ireland, or the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is part of the EU, and they have euros and are still in the European Union. Northern Ireland considers itself to be part of Britain, has British pounds, and is governed by the UK government. So really an awful lot of problems have developed before, after, and during, and especially with Brexit as well, because there aren't any physical borders. So lots and lots of problems surrounding this partition. But anyway, the 3rd of May, 1921, Ireland was literally divided into two. So let's have a look at this report, which was sent to the Honourable Sir Alfred Mond, and he was the Minister of Health. So we don't need to read all of this, but he's basically saying that in the last 10 years, the scenario has had uncommon significance. The country has been at a massive loss, and there's a heavy responsibility and burden. So we can see the pain and agony of the average person coming through this preliminary report summarising the census. Find My Past was selected in 2018 as the National Archives' chosen commercial partner to digitize the census. So basically, the National Archives, which is in a place called Kew, which is basically South London in England. So they hold these documents, and Find My Past was allowed to digitize these paper documents. And this was in association with the Office for National Statistics. Between 2018 and 2022, they were diligently basically photographing all of the census, which you have to bear in mind had been sitting in boxes or cupboards, squashed for 100 years. So they were dealing with squashed paper. This was revealed in January 2022 to great excitement, and Find My Past has got 3 years exclusivity. In your handout, there will be some clickable links there, but you could just Google. They've also got loads of blogs. Find My Past is really, really enjoying having the 1921 census, and they've got loads of blogs, articles, and examples. So really, really lots of information there. There are 28,000 volumes of householder returns. Each page was to a greater or a smaller amount stuck to the page before, and they had to get conservation specialists to with like pins nearly to try and separate these pages and do a good job of flattening them out. They found some strange things trapped in the boxes as well, and obviously some were damaged, and anyway, very delicate task. And a team had to create the image, and they all had to be quality checked. So what information can you find in the 1921 census? Obviously, it's asking questions about the population, their houses, their ages, and whether they were married, single, widowed, or divorced. They then asked about whether or not children, their parents were still alive, education, birthplace, foreign born, that's their terminology, not mine, occupations and industries, dependency, were you in a couple, and where was your workplace? So the nitty-gritty of this was, and this is the exciting thing, you were asked, what is your age in years and months? So this has really knocked a couple of spots off my brick walls in my tree. Sadly, or not, just joking, I've got loads and loads of ancestors in South Wales, and they do seem to persist and rotate around a few specific names. So whenever I'm researching somebody, there's often 20 possibilities. So this is so exciting and really has broken down many brick walls. What is your age in years and months? So they would be 22 and 4 months, or 37 and 8 months. So you can, let's hope people were telling the truth, you can basically narrow it down a little bit, because in a previous sentence, they might have said 31, but now you've got 41 and 6 months or something. So really helps with narrowing down, looking for birth certificates. I don't know how they asked this question, but children were asked, is your mother and father alive or dead? So a cheerful question there. People for the first time were asked if they were divorced. People for the first time were asked about the RAF. And a lovely one for me is, well, what is your workplace and the address? So excited. Every one of my Welsh ancestors had coal miner. So I've nearly pulled my hair right out looking for coal miners called Davis. So basically, what's the address of your workplace? That's amazing. And some questions were removed, such as what could be considered a rude question about infirmity. So how many people was this involving? Well, Great Britain, it was nearly England and Wales, nearly 38 million. Scotland, nearly 5 million. Jersey, 49,000. Guernsey and some others, 40,500. Isle of Man, 60,000. And let's hope I've got my maths right, 42 million, nearly 43 million. For those of you that would like to really play with these statistics, there are a couple of hundred pages in the Registrar General's Statistical Review of England and Wales, and I found this on a Google book. How exciting is that? So these statistics were taken from page 117. It was a bit of a nightmare scrolling down, but what an interesting book if you like stats. Ireland, we've got differences between Northern Ireland, the Irish Free State, and Ireland as a whole. And I think that was on page 118. Just because I was in agony scrolling up and down, and I had to do it manually, I found this. Somebody might be able to explain this to me later, because I only found this a couple of hours ago. I was just tidying up the presentation, and it said on page 118, Canada, Dominion of 8,788,483 million. And it's got explicitly Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, Manitoba. So you can just see that list there. So I'm not 100% sure about this, so hopefully somebody in the chat, or they can tell me afterwards what this is revealing. So Canada is, it looks like, a dominion, and I think that something happened in 1964. So my world general knowledge isn't the best, so I'd be interested to hear about the explanation for these statistics. That would be fab, please. So back to the UK and Wales. This was the first census after World War One, and it's been estimated that 750,000 men between 20 and 40 died. Obviously, therefore, while the men were at war, apart from a couple of people who got a bit confused with a neighbour, or, you know, there were some confusions, but basically what we can see really massively clearly here is that there was a reduction in the number of 2, 3 and 4-year-olds compared to the numbers of 5, 6, 7 and 8-year-olds in the census, and a big jump of new babies as the men returned from the war. We can clearly see the shape there. In the question, which was cheerfully asking you, are your mum and dad dead or alive? I just don't know where they get these questions from, but as genealogists, this is useful now. At the time, it would have been traumatizing. Anyway, the statistics that they got when they asked children, are your parents alive or dead, then wafted into the Widows, Orphans and Old Age Pensions Act of 1925. So all of the statistics got analysed and helped with this introduction of the Old Age Pensions Act, which we have still got now, and the Widows and Orphans Act as well. So people were getting a little bit of financial help after 1925. So that's nice. If you can't find your ancestor at home, and that is so irritating, if they are in one census 1 year and then 10 years later they're not, and then 10 years after that there they are again. So annoying when you lose people in a census. Because it was in June, not April, one argument is that many people would have been going on day trips or mini breaks. So by now, people were having a whole day off work, and many people were arguing for having Saturdays and Sundays off. So these are two stereotypical photographs here. And if you've lost your ancestors from home in this census, or you're looking for relatives, they might have been on a day trip or a mini break, and you might find them in the stereotypical look how squashed that beach is, and people fully clothed, and the joke of a hanky on your head. And you might find them in Blackpool, Southend, Brighton, Llandudno, Margate or Ramsgate, for example. So these are stereotypical day tripping places. Your London ancestors would have gone to Brighton, wouldn't they? Your Manchester ancestors might have gone to Blackpool. So you could have a look at these on a map and see where you've lost some relatives. So Find My Past charges you to look at these images. I don't know about the Canadian figures, sorry. On the website, they'd only got these figures here, but perhaps you could work out the currency. So in everybody's opinion, it's a little bit expensive, but what a massive task, and we all really enjoy it. So I've just basically been a little bit more careful with ordering these pages. So you basically get access to a few pages, and there's a fee. I didn't realize it was a few pages, and I thought it was one page, and I was irritated and had to go back in to flick to the left and to the right to see these other images. So don't forget, you're paying for a few images, and I'll talk about that in a minute. If you physically were coming to the UK, you could get this access for free. You can't go and look at the records. Nobody is allowed to be looking at the paper records, but you can go online in the National Archives in Kew, in Manchester Library and the National Library of Wales. So you can go online and get it for free. You can't walk in and get it for free in those 3 places. It's online, but it's free. If you're not in those 3 buildings, you're being charged a fee. So let me give you some examples. So this is what the whole sheet looks like. And you don't get the whole sheet, you get it in 2 or 3 or 4 different pages. So do remember, this isn't the sheet that you get, this is like an overview. And do remember, which is what I didn't know, that you can flick to the left and the right, and there's a few other pages. So this is an overview of what it would be looking like. These are some of my ancestors. So what we can see here is the head, and we've got people's ages there, their sex, and if they're married or they're single, where they were born, and what their jobs were, this kind of thing. If you flick onto another page, you could look at the address a little bit more carefully. This isn't the best handwriting, is it? And I've struggled with the name of this farm. I think I've ended up thinking it's Wernbury, but I'm still not convinced, and that handwriting is a bit italic. So what we have got here is somebody's, I don't know if you can squeeze up your eyes, just rest assured, somebody's age in years and months. So we've got David Rees, who is 58 years and 2 months. So that's fab. His wife, Sarah Ann, 57 years and 1 month. So very, very explicit, as I've mentioned, with these irritatingly common surnames. So that's great now. So I can go from 20 possibilities to maybe 2 or 3, going to look for birth certificates. So the age is great. The thing that's really excited me, because every ancestor seems to have been working in the coal mine or the steel works or the tin works, you get the exact workplace. So it says here that the son is working, if you can squeeze up your eyes just above the blue arrow, in the Davin tin plate works. So that's fab. So I Googled Davin tin plate works, and look how exciting this is. There's a whole website, couldn't believe my luck, a whole website dedicated to the Davin iron and tin plate works. Gold dust. So there's a photo in 1880. There's a photo from different years, including 1921. And I've been really, I'm adopted, so I wouldn't recognize anybody, but I've really spent hours looking at these photos thinking, are you my ancestor? You know, so really been very, very interesting. We can all start looking for similarities and getting overexcited, but I was really pleased. So this website has got a mass of information, and at the bottom of the mass of information were books that they'd gleaned some of the information from. So this was just such an exciting find. So just literally that one sentence above the blue arrow, this boy, 18 years and 10 months, working in the Davin tin plate works. So Googled it, loads of information, loads of photos. From social commentary, I can have a look at what are the ladies wearing, what are the men wearing, have they got shoes, do they look clean, do they look thin or chubby or smoking? So masses amounts of social observations there. So what we can do, if we look at the censuses, not just the 1921, but other censuses, we can sometimes find exact information. So this was a family with another common surname, Bevin, with that unusual name William, married to the unusually named Margaret. Anyway, so basically they've got a 4-month-old baby. Well, that's fab. So the name is common, but 4 months in that census. So basically March 1851, this baby was 4 months old. He had to be born in December or thereabouts, but it wouldn't have been the July, or, you know, he wasn't -2. So basically, because he's 4 months old in March, I think he's born in December, and I can exclude, you know, I could include November, December, and January, but I wouldn't be having to worry much more about that person. So for those of you that are abroad, in the UK, we have got the GRO, which is the General Register Office. I'm not sure how, but it's linked to the Passport Office. And if you go onto the website, you can order birth, marriage, and death certificates. They are between £11 and £14. Those of you that I can't even do time zones, let alone convert money. So really not a lot of money. And I basically order one a week, and I've got files with all of this kind of thing in. But you can go online, the GRO, and order these for between £11 and £14, and they directly come to you. If you were panicking about them being posted, you can get a PDF, which is cheaper. It's not as cute as the paper certificate. It's just a clipping, but basically gives you all the information that you'd be looking at. I don't know why I spend a bit more and get the certificates, but everybody's in a file and I quite like it. So if you go through Ancestry, for example, they charge you an admin fee. So this is a useful tip to order birth, marriage, and death certificates from the GRO. While you're looking for people in the 1921 census, you might want to utilize substitutes. These are clickable in your handout, or you can Google them, because you've got the person or not in the 1921 census, but you can add to this information by building out other information from electoral rolls. Over 21 and women over 30 had the right to vote. So there's lists of those people. School admission registers, which usually gave parents name and address. And rather intriguingly, which is a whole other webinar if you wanted to invite me back, the 1939 register. In the 1939 register, you were asked for your date of birth. An even more exciting layer of information, date of birth, scribbled out over every girl, little girl in the 1939 register. Those who got married have got a new surname on the top, and that's when they've got married. And this was updated until 1991 as part of the National Health Service. So, as I've said, this is a whole webinar, but let me skim through. The 1939 register, war was declared on the 3rd of September. By the 29th of September, it was becoming obvious that people needed ID cards. So within 3 weeks, somebody was coming and asking you for all of your information. After you had given all of your details for your ID card, it became obvious that food was in short supply. So you then got a ration book. And if you were in a heavy manual physical job, men generally would get an extra ration, and this would be milk and eggs and butter and a slice of ham or a little tiny bit of cheese. So more than likely people were giving the truth. 40 million people were in there. So this is really, really useful. The very exciting thing is little girls in 1939, when they first went to the doctor or they first went to the hospital after they were married, their new surname was, their old surname was scrubbed out and their new one was put in. Earlier, I was talking about maps, and if you go into the census and squeeze your eyes down to the bottom, you'll see a page number. They're usually maximum 30 or 40 pages, sometimes they're only 15 pages. If you click and go to page 1, you've got the enumerators route. So tragically for me, it always seems to be somebody writing in italics. But if you can squeeze up your eyeballs and read the italics, what I do is every street that I can read, I put it into a Google map. So the picture in the middle is the more or less circular route that this enumerator took. And I know that my ancestor lived somewhere along that route. And the one on the bottom, the person seemed to be walking in straighter lines. And again, I can locate my ancestor's property as somewhere along that enumerator route. So they were between this road that I can read and that street that I can read, and then I can just kind of generally work out. So go to the census, go to page 1, follow the enumerator's route if you can read it, and then you can locate your ancestor if you can't read. You know, the handwriting's a bit squidgy. This is busy and it's in your handout, but these are unpublished censuses. So don't forget the 100-year closure rule was established after 1911. Tragically, the 1931 census was destroyed in a fire in the war, but the Scottish censuses are still okay because they were in Edinburgh, and they'll be coming out in 2032. There wasn't a census in 1941 because of World War II, and therefore, after the 1921 census, we won't get a census opened until 1951 in 2052. I think it's a bit energetic to think that we'll all be around to open that census, so I feel a bit sad on many levels about that. But basically, the 1921 census is pretty much the last one that we're going to be opening, unless you've got Scottish ancestors. 10 years ago, people were offered to do the census online. Very few people took them up on it. The 1926 census will be published in 2026. This slide is busy, but it's in your handout. I just wanted you to get as much information as possible. Many people will lament all the censuses in Ireland were destroyed. Well, they weren't all destroyed, but obviously a good few were. And basically, if you do a little bit of research, you can see that there are 1901 and 1911 censuses. Ireland wasn't in the 1921 census because, remember, they were partitioning Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland after the Civil War. And basically, the 1921 census, which was held in 26, won't be opened until 2026. So it's something to look forward to for me, because I've got Irish ancestors. And you're looking at about 3 million people. Last year, or the year before, or is it 2 years ago? Yeah, the pandemic and being locked down for 2 years has confused me. So yeah, 2 years ago now, we had a census. I was really excited. We got sent a paper code. It didn't make any sense. Here's a letter through the post with a code, and now you can fill it in online. Just seemed daft, really. Anyway, rather intriguingly, there were 2 questions about gender identity and a cheeky question, really, about your sexual orientation. And have you served in the armed forces? Lots of people have been telling me, and you can just break friends with these people, that maybe the 2021 census is going to be the last, because with Big Brother, we've got tons and tons and tons of information. We don't really need the census. I went to buy a washing machine the other day, and the boy at the counter had already got my address and my bank details and my job. You know, we've got so much information floating around now. So what I'm hoping for this evening with me, or this afternoon with you, is that if you've got specific ancestors or relatives mingled in with the census, mingled in with maps, merging with birth, marriage and death certificates, mingled in with what job they did, wills and newspapers, plus social history. What were they doing on that day in time, locally, regionally and nationally? Hopefully you'll have a little bit more of an indication about any ancestors or relatives around this 1921 period. You're very welcome to stay in touch. I don't do trees, but I've got colleagues who professionally do. If you've enjoyed the talk, either invite me back again for another one, or you can go on my website. I do at least 1 or 2 a week and at least a conference a month. Check the time zones. And the 2 books that are available, Ethical Dilemmas in Genealogy, that's also a talk, and The Psychology of Searching. And these are on paperback or Kindle on Amazon. Hopefully it's not cheeky to remind you that Roots Tech is coming up. I'll be doing 5 presentations. So if you're in person, come and say hello to me. And if you are virtual, you just have to do a virtual wave. I'm also ridiculously excited to be going not only to Salt Lake City in March to give those presentations. Speakers are really treated like a princess there. I'm so excited. But I'm also going to the Ohio Genealogical Society, which is April the 26th to the 29th. And finally, next week, I'm doing a talk which is called Turning Your Tree into a Talk. And this is because every time I meet somebody, they are so interesting with their tree. And then I say to them, oh, that would be a great presentation, but people get a bit panicky. So if you fancied, 2:30 in the afternoon is British time. I've no idea what time it is with you. I'm a nightmare with time zones.